He was a king in a city of titans, a man who built an Emma from scratch. She was his pregnant wife, the woman who was meant to be the heart of that empire. But on the night of his 35th birthday, surrounded by a constellation of the rich and powerful Julian Croft, looked at his wife Eleanor and delivered the 4 words that would shatter their perfect world. In front of everyone, he called her just a +1. He thought it was a throwaway line, a careless joke. He had no idea it was a declaration of war. By morning, their private life was the most public story in the world, and the divorce papers were already viral. The penthouse floated above New York City like a separate kingdom. From the 72nd floor, the city wasn't a place of noise and hustle, but a silent, glittering tapestry laid out for the benefit of its owner, Julian Croft. Julian didn't just live in the city. He dominated its skyline both literally and figuratively. His tech company, Nexus Dynamics, had reshaped the digital landscape, making him a billionaire before his 30th birthday. Now at 35, he was an icon of ruthless innovation and staggering wealth. His wife, Elena Vance, stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, one hand resting protectively on the gentle curve of her stomach. 6 months pregnant, she felt like an extension of the view. Beautiful, admired, but ultimately part of the scenery. The city lights cast long, dancing shadows across the cavernous living room, a space so meticulously designed it felt more like a modern art gallery than a home. White marble floors gleamed, reflecting a curated collection of minimalist furniture and abstract art that cost more than the suburban homes she'd grown up in. It was a beautiful cage, and the bars were forged from Julian's love. It was a possessive, all-consuming love. In the beginning, it had been intoxicating. Eleanor, a sharp and respected art curator, had been swept away by his fierce intelligence and unwavering focus. He pursued her with the same relentless energy he applied to a corporate takeover. He didn't just want to date her. He wanted to own every facet of her life. He'd convinced her to leave her job at the gallery, arguing that she shouldn't have to work, that her eye for beauty was best applied to their life together. "You're my masterpiece, Ellie," he'd murmured against her hair one night after they'd made love in a Parisian hotel overlooking the Seine. "Why would I let anyone else have you on display?" At the time, it sounded like the most romantic thing she had ever heard. Now, it echoed in her mind with a more sinister ring. Slowly, imperceptibly, he had chiseled away at her independence. Her friends were gradually replaced by the wives of his business associates. Her days, once filled with professional challenges and artistic discovery, were now a carefully managed schedule of Pilates charity luncheons and fittings for the endless stream of galas and events. He called it building their brand. She was starting to feel like a logo. Tonight was the pinnacle of that brand-building Julian's 35th birthday dinner. It wasn't a simple celebration. It was a power summit disguised as a party. The guest list, which Julian had personally vetted, included tech rivals, Wall Street sharks, a senator, and a smattering of new money celebrities. The venue was Ethel, a restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a sign, only a discreetly marked door and a 6-month waiting list. Julian had booked the entire place. "Are you almost ready?" Julian's voice, smooth and commanding, cut through her thoughts. He emerged from their bedroom, already a vision of tailored perfection. His Tom Ford suit was the color of midnight, fitting his athletic frame without a single crease. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his blue eyes, usually alight with sharp calculation, were now warm with anticipation for the evening's performance. "Almost," Elena said, turning from the window. She gestured to the 2 dresses laid out on their king-sized bed. One was a deep emerald green silk, elegant and understated. The other was a dazzling silver-sequined column that shimmered like a freshly minted coin. "I can't decide," she said, her voice softer than she intended. Julian walked over his expensive cologne, filling the space between them. He didn't look at her. He looked at the dresses. He tapped the silver one. "This one. It's a celebration. You should shine." He meant it as a compliment, but it felt like a directive. "You are an ornament. Dazzle them." She preferred the green one. It felt more like her. But arguing was pointless. It would create a friction, a tiny crack in the perfect facade of their evening, and Julian hated cracks. "Silver it is," she said, forcing a smile. As she slipped into the dress, she felt the familiar weight of expectation settle over her. The sequins were cool against her skin, a beautiful but unyielding armor. She was no longer Elena Vance, the art curator. She was Mrs. Julian Croft, a vital accessory for his big night. In the car, a custom black Rolls-Royce that glided through the city streets like a phantom, Julian was electric. He scrolled through his phone, dictating sharp replies to his assistant via voice-to-text. "Tell Marcus Thorne I'll discuss the acquisition after the markets close on Monday." Not a second before he commanded. "And remind the events team that the champagne must be the 08 vintage. No substitutions." He didn't ask her how she was feeling. He didn't notice the way she winced as the baby kicked a sharp jab against her ribs. He was already at the party, his mind orchestrating every detail, ensuring his dominance was felt by every person in the room. Elena stared out the window at the blur of lesser lives, people hailing cabs, grabbing a slice of pizza, laughing with friends on a street corner. A pang of longing so sharp and sudden it stole her breath, shot through her. She wanted that. The anonymity. The simple, uncurated reality. She reached over and placed a hand on his arm. "Julian." He glanced up from his phone, a flicker of irritation in his eyes before he masked it. "Yes, darling, could we maybe take a trip after the baby is born? Just the three of us. Somewhere quiet. Italy, maybe. A small village. No phones." Julian's smile was dismissive but kind, the way one might smile at a child's fantasy. "Ellie, we can go anywhere you want. We'll rent a yacht, a private island. You won't have to lift a finger. But no phones. Nexus is my baby, too. I can't abandon it." He turned back to his screen, the conversation over. She withdrew her hand. His baby. He had two of them now. One was a multi-billion-dollar global corporation. The other was growing inside her womb. She was beginning to fear she knew which one he valued more. As the Rolls-Royce pulled up to the discreet entrance of Ethel, the flash of a single paparazzo's camera momentarily blinded her. Julian squeezed her hand, not with affection, but with a silent command. "The show is starting. It's time to play your part." And like a fool, Elena smiled, lifted her chin, and stepped out of the car, the silver dress glittering under the city lights, ready to shine for her husband. The interior of Ethel was a masterclass in opulent restraint. Dim lighting, dark wood, and hushed tones created an atmosphere of conspiratorial intimacy. The air hummed with the low frequency of power, the collective murmur of people who shaped markets and influenced policy. It was a room where a whispered comment could launch a startup or sink a stock. Eleanor navigated the room with practiced grace, a warm smile fixed on her face. She accepted air kisses from women dripping in diamonds and politely laughed at the self-important jokes of men whose net worth she could only guess at. She was a consummate hostess, a role she had learned to play with perfection. She spoke about art, about their recent trip to Monaco, about the nursery they were designing, safe-approved topics that kept her firmly in the box labeled Julian Croft's beautiful wife. Julian, meanwhile, was in his element. He moved through the crowd not as a guest, but as a gravitational center. People orbited him, desperate for a moment of his attention. He would clap a man on the back, share a confidential-sounding whisper, and then move on, leaving a trail of inflated egos in his wake. Elena watched him, a familiar mix of pride and unease swirling within her. He was brilliant, magnetic, a force of nature. But she knew the truth. The warmth he projected was strategic, the charisma a tool. They were seated at the head of a long, banquet-style table. Elena was on his right, and his younger sister, Amelia, was on his left. Amelia was the only member of Julian's family who seemed to see Elena as a person rather than an acquisition. With sharp, intelligent eyes that mirrored her brother's, but held a genuine warmth, she leaned over to Elena, her voice a welcome respite from the surrounding din. "You look stunning, Elena, but exhausted." Amelia said, her gaze soft with concern. "Is he working you too hard?" Elena gave a small, appreciative smile. "The baby's just decided my bladder is its personal trampoline. Comes with the territory. Well, if you need to escape for a bit, just give me a look. I'll fake a dramatic family emergency. I've been practicing." They shared a brief conspiratorial laugh before Julian tapped his glass with a fork, calling for attention. The room fell silent instantly. "Friends, colleagues," he began, his voice resonating with practiced confidence. "Thank you for being here. They say the measure of a man is the company he keeps. Looking around this room tonight, I feel very well measured indeed." A wave of appreciative laughter followed. He continued speaking of his company's future, of technological frontiers, of a new philanthropic foundation he was launching. It was a masterfully delivered speech, equal parts humble brag and visionary rhetoric. Elena found herself momentarily captivated again, remembering the man who had wooed her with his grand ideas and unstoppable drive. He concluded by raising his glass. To the future, to Nexus, and to the next 35 years. The room erupted in applause and a chorus of "To Julian." As the dinner conversation resumed, the man seated to Elena's right, a grizzled oil tycoon from Texas named Bill, turned to her. "So, little lady," he boomed, his voice thick with a southern drawl. "Julian tells me you used to be in the art world. Must be a nice change of pace, not having to worry about a career." Before Elena could formulate a polite response that defended her past life without sounding defensive. Marcus Thorne. Julian's slick and perpetually smirking business rival leaned forward from across the table. "Don't be so old-fashioned, Bill," Marcus said, his eyes glittering with mischief. "Elena is a formidable woman. I remember reading a piece about her in Art Forum. A brilliant curator. The art world's loss is Julian's gain, though I imagine her talents are rather underutilized these days." The comment hung in the air, a subtle but unmistakable jab at Julian, questioning his wife's role. Elena felt a flush of heat rise to her cheeks. She could feel Julian's body tense beside her. This was Marcus's game, finding the weak points, the personal vulnerabilities, and pressing on them in a public forum. Julian let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound that didn't reach his eyes. He draped his arm over the back of Elena's chair, a gesture that looked possessive rather than affectionate. "Oh, Elena is crucial to my success," Julian said, his voice dangerously smooth. He looked around the table, a performer playing to his audience. Every emperor needs an empress. She runs our homes, manages our social calendar, and makes sure I look good at parties." He paused for effect, then smiled a wide, predatory smile. "She's the best accessory a man could ask for. After all," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, joking tone, meant for the whole table to hear. "What's the point of making a fortune if you don't have a beautiful +1 to bring to dinner?" The words landed in the center of the table like stones dropped into a silent pond. Silence. It was only for a second, but it stretched into an eternity. In that moment, Eleanor's world tilted on its axis, just a +1. It wasn't the words themselves, but the casual public cruelty of them, the way he had reduced her entire being, her past, her present, her future as the mother of his child, into a single dismissive label. He had stripped her of her identity in front of their entire world, and offered her up as the punchline to a joke about his own success. The oil tycoon Bill let out an awkward chuckle. A few others followed suit, eager to dispel the suffocating tension. Marcus Thorne simply leaned back, a look of smug satisfaction on his face. He had found the weak point, and Julian, in his arrogance, had just confirmed it for him. Elena felt every drop of blood drain from her face. She could feel the pitying glances of the other women, the uncomfortable shifting of the men. She looked at Julian, praying to see a flicker of regret, a sign that he knew he'd gone too far. There was nothing. He was smiling, basking in the attention, oblivious to the wound he had just inflicted. He hadn't just insulted her. He had revealed in the clearest possible terms exactly how he saw her. She wasn't his partner. She wasn't his equal. She was an item on a checklist for a successful life, right alongside the penthouse, the private jet, and the vintage champagne. Her vision tunneled. The ambient noise of the restaurant faded into a dull roar. The only thing she could hear was the frantic, panicked thumping of her own heart. With a calmness that she would later marvel at, Elena placed her napkin on the table. She pushed her chair back, the sound scraping loudly in the suddenly quiet room. Julian finally looked at her, his smile faltering. "Ellie, where are you going?" She didn't look at him. She couldn't. If she did, she would either break down or erupt. Instead, she looked at Amelia, whose face was a mask of pale, horrified shock. "I'm not feeling well," Elena said, her voice a fragile, thin thread. "I think I need to go home." Without another word, she turned and walked away from the table. She moved with a strange, dreamlike precision, her back straight, her head held high. She could feel every eye in the restaurant on her, a physical weight against her skin. She didn't look back. She walked past the concerned maitre d', through the discreet door, and out into the cool night air, leaving the sound of her husband calling her name behind her. The ride back to the penthouse was a blur of streetlights and tears. The moment she was inside the silent cocoon of the Rolls-Royce, the composure she had fought so hard to maintain shattered into a million pieces. A gut-wrenching sob tore from her throat, raw and painful. She curled into the plush leather seat, wrapping her arms around her belly as if to shield her unborn child from the shrapnel of her own heartbreaking. Just a +1. The phrase echoed and re-echoed in her mind, each repetition twisting the knife. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was the truth laid bare under the harsh lights of public scrutiny. All the small slights, the dismissed opinions, the gentle coercions over the past 3 years suddenly clicked into place. They weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a pattern. He hadn't been building a life with her. He had been installing her into his. By the time the elevator doors opened directly into their apartment, her tears had subsided, replaced by a cold, terrifying clarity. The penthouse, once a symbol of their shared success, now felt like a mausoleum. The art on the walls, pieces she had once loved, now seemed to mock her with their silent, static beauty. She walked through the cavernous rooms, her silver dress, the one he had chosen for her, feeling like a costume from a play that had just ended in tragedy. She went into their bedroom and stripped the dress off, letting it fall into a glittering heap on the floor. She put on a pair of simple cashmere sweatpants and a soft t-shirt, clothes that felt like her own skin. For a moment, she just stood in the center of the room, breathing. In, out. The silence was absolute. He hadn't followed her. He had chosen his party, his audience, over his distraught pregnant wife. That, more than anything, told her everything she needed to know. Her gaze fell on her reflection in the large, ornate mirror. She saw a woman she barely recognized. The confident, ambitious curator who had once commanded auction rooms and debated art theory with passion was gone. In her place was a pale, haunted figure with shadows under her eyes. But as she looked closer, she saw something else stirring in their depths, a flicker of the old fire, a spark of defiance. The love she felt for Julian had been real, but it had been built on a foundation of illusion, the illusion that he saw her as his equal. Tonight, he had taken a sledgehammer to that foundation, and in the rubble, Elena knew she could not rebuild. Not for herself, and certainly not for the child she was carrying. She would not raise her son or daughter in a house where their mother was considered an accessory. The decision, when it came, was not an emotional outburst. It was a calm, rational conclusion. It was over. But she knew Julian. He wouldn't let her go easily. Not because he couldn't live without her, but because her leaving would be a public relations disaster, a chink in his armor. It would be a stain on his perfect brand. He would fight her not with love, but with lawyers and non-disclosure agreements. He would try to control the narrative, to paint her as unstable, emotional, ungrateful. He would bury her in legal fees and public shame. She would not let that happen. He had humiliated her publicly. He had defined her in front of the world. She decided in that moment that she would redefine herself just as publicly. She would not be a victim in his story. She would be the author of her own. Her hands, surprisingly steady, reached for her phone. She scrolled through her contacts past the dozens of names that were Julian's connections, not hers. She stopped at one Chloe Bennett. Chloe wasn't just her best friend from college. She was one of the most feared divorce attorneys in New York, a shark who specialized in high-conflict, high-asset cases. They had remained close, but Elena had seen less of her as she became more enmeshed in Julian's world. Julian had found Chloe's sharp-tongued independence abrasive. Now that abrasiveness was exactly what Elena needed. She pressed the call button. It was past midnight, but she knew Chloe would answer. Chloe's voice was instantly alert. "It's late. Is everything okay? Is it the baby?" "The baby's fine," Elena said, her voice hoarse. "But my marriage is over." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Not of shock, but of grim understanding. Chloe had never been Julian's biggest fan. "What did he do?" She asked, her tone shifting from concerned friend to focused professional. Elena told her everything. The dinner, the guests, the calculated jab from Marcus Thorne, and then the 4 words. "He called me his +1. She heard Chloe exhale slowly. "That condescending, narcissistic son of a bitch," Chloe said, the venom in her voice, a soothing balm to Elena's raw nerves. Okay, listen to me. Where are you now? I'm at the penthouse. He's still at the party. Good. We need to move fast before he comes home and tries to fix this with his checkbook and some crocodile tears. Elena, what do you want to happen? This was it, the moment of truth. The old Eleanor would have wanted to disappear to hide. The new Eleanor, the one forged in the fire of tonight's humiliation, had a different answer. I want a divorce, Chloe, she said, her voice gaining strength. And I want to be the one who tells the story. He took my voice, my career, my identity. I'm taking them back, starting tomorrow morning. A slow smile crept into Chloe's voice. I see. You don't just want to leave him. You want to make a statement. He made a statement tonight. I'm just providing the context. I love it, Chloe said, the energy crackling down the line. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to start drafting the petition for dissolution right now. Irreconcilable differences, citing a pattern of emotional distress. We'll be specific but dignified. Meanwhile, you need to pack a bag. Essentials only. Things he won't immediately notice are gone. Passport, personal documents, any jewelry that has sentimental value and wasn't a gift from him. I have a corporate apartment in Midtown that's empty. It's secure, and he won't know to look for you there. I'm sending a car for you in 1 hour. Do not take one of his. Do you understand? Yes. Elena said, a surge of adrenaline clearing the last vestiges of her sorrow. She was no longer just a victim. She was a strategist. Good. Now for the other part, Chloe continued, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial hush. The narrative. He controls the business press, but he doesn't control the gossip columns. Not really. They have more integrity than he thinks. I have a contact at page 6, a journalist named Maria Rodriguez. She's tough but fair. She dislikes bullies like Julian. If we give her the exclusive, she'll run with it. We leak the story along with a copy of the filed divorce petition to her. We time it for 5 a.m. It'll hit the internet just as the city is waking up. It will be the #1 story before the markets even open. Elena's mind raced, processing the audacity of the plan. It was ruthless, swift, and public, a page taken directly from Julian's own playbook. We'll need a statement, Elena said. From me. Exactly, Chloe affirmed. Short, powerful, and irrefutable. We use his own words against him. For the next hour, fueled by righteous fury and black coffee, Elena and Chloe crafted her Declaration of Independence. It was a masterstroke of controlled rage and elegant defiance. As Elena packed her bag, her hands moved with purpose. She took her mother's wedding band, a small collection of art books from her college days, and a framed photo of her and Chloe laughing on a beach years ago. She left behind the diamonds, the designer clothes, and the life that had been curated for her. Just as she zipped the bag shut, her phone buzzed. It was Julian. She ignored it. He called again. And again. Then a text message appeared on the screen. Ellie, where are you? People are asking questions. You embarrassed me. Elena stared at the message, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. You embarrassed me. Even now, his primary concern was his own image. There was no apology, no concern for her feelings, just anger that she had disrupted his perfect evening. That single text message solidified any lingering doubt she might have had. It was the final nail in the coffin of their marriage. She typed a single reply, her fingers cold and steady. I'm at home. The home you created for your +1. Then she blocked his number. A few minutes later, the private elevator chimed. Her heart leaped into her throat, thinking it was him. But it was the doorman, a kind man named George, announcing that her car was downstairs. Chloe's car. Eleanor took one last look around the magnificent, empty penthouse. It was a monument to a man's ego, and she was glad to be leaving it. She walked out without looking back, stepping into the elevator and descending from the kingdom in the sky, ready to start a war on the ground below. The corporate apartment in Midtown was the antithesis of the penthouse. It was functional anonymous and blessedly sterile. The furniture was modern but unremarkable. The walls were a neutral beige, and the view was of a neighboring office building, not the entire glittering expanse of Manhattan. It was a place to work, not to live, and for Eleanor it felt like the safest place on earth. Chloe was already there, a whirlwind of focused energy. Her laptop was open on the dining table, which had been converted into a makeshift command center. Legal documents were neatly stacked to one side, and 2 steaming mugs of coffee sat waiting. Despite the hour, it was now almost 3 a.m. Chloe looked as sharp as ever in a tailored blazer, and jeans, her expression a mixture of fierce loyalty and professional zeal. "Welcome to the war room," Chloe said, giving Elena a quick, hard hug. "You look like hell, but you also look free." "I feel—" Elena searched for the word. "Awake, for the first time in a long time." "Good." "Anger is a powerful stimulant," Chloe said, gesturing to the chair opposite hers. "Now let's get to work. I've drafted the initial petition. I need you to read it over. It's standard, but it establishes the timeline and officially gets the ball rolling." Elena read through the legal jargon, her past life as a detail-oriented curator serving her well. It was all there, cold and formal. "In re the marriage of Julian Croft and Elena Vance." Seeing their names on a document like this was jarring, but it was also liberating. It was real. "It's perfect," she said, her voice steady. "Okay, I'll have it electronically filed with the court at exactly 5:00 a.m. The moment it's filed, it's a public record. Which brings us to phase 2, the statement. Chloe turned her laptop screen toward Elena. On it was a simple text document. Statement from Elena Vance. "After a period of careful reflection, I have made the difficult decision to petition for a divorce from my husband, Julian Croft. This is a deeply personal matter, but given the public nature of our lives, I wanted to share my truth directly. A marriage should be a partnership of equals, built on a foundation of mutual love and respect. Last night, my husband publicly and succinctly summarized our marriage by referring to me, his pregnant wife, as just a +1. That characterization is not a foundation upon which I can build a future for myself or for my child. I ask for privacy as I navigate this transition and prepare to welcome my baby into a new, healthier life. I have no further comment at this time." Elena read it twice. It was brilliant. It was devastating. It was the truth. It didn't sling mud or reveal sordid secrets. It simply held up a mirror to Julian's own words, letting his arrogance be his own undoing. The inclusion of her pregnancy was a masterstroke, transforming her from a scorned wife into a protective mother. "Chloe, it's lethal," Chloe supplied with a grim smile. "That's the idea. We're not playing his game. We're changing the rules. He uses power and money. We're using the truth. He'll be furious." "He'll be apoplectic," Chloe corrected her. His entire empire is built on an image of untouchable success and control. This story shows he can't even control his own home. It humanizes you and makes him look like a monster. In the court of public opinion, we'll have a verdict before his lawyers even finish their first cup of coffee. For the next hour, they finalized the plan. Chloe prepped the email to Maria Rodriguez at page 6. The subject line was simple: Exclusive Julian Croft divorce. The body of the email would contain Elena's statement and a time-stamped copy of the filed divorce petition, proving its authenticity. As the clock ticked closer to 5 a.m., a strange calm settled over Elena. This was the biggest gamble of her life. She was taking on a man who could, with a single phone call, ruin careers and crush companies. But she felt a sense of power she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't his power derived from wealth and influence. It was her own derived from conviction and self-respect. "It's time," Chloe said softly, her finger hovering over the mouse. "Are you ready?" Elena looked out the window. The sky was beginning to lighten, shifting from inky black to a bruised purple. The city was still asleep, unaware of the digital bombshell that was about to detonate. "I'm ready," Elena said. She took a deep breath. "Do it!" With a decisive click, Chloe hit send. There was no turning back. For a few minutes they sat in silence, the only sound the quiet hum of the laptop. The sun began to rise, casting long golden rays between the buildings. It felt symbolic, like the dawn of a new era in her life. Then at 5:21 a.m., Chloe's phone buzzed. It was an email from Maria Rodriguez. "Got it. Wow. Story will be live in 5 minutes. Hold on tight." Chloe looked at Elena, her eyes wide. "Here we go." She quickly navigated to the page 6 website and began refreshing the page. And then there it was. The headline, stark and sensational, flashed across the screen. King Croft-sized split. Pregnant wife, Elena Vance, files for divorce after millionaire husband calls her just a +1 at his own birthday bash. The story was everything they had hoped for. Maria had used Elena's statement in its entirety, framing it as a powerful rebuke from a woman scorned. She included details of the lavish party, the high-profile guests, and the context of Julian's immense wealth, which made his comment seem not just cruel, but grotesquely arrogant. The article ended with a simple, devastating line. Sources say, Mr. Croft was celebrating his 35th birthday. It may be one he lives to regret. Within seconds, the story was lighting up the internet. Chloe pulled up Twitter. +1 divorce was already trending. It was being shared by journalists, celebrities, and thousands of ordinary people. The comments were a tidal wave of support for Elena and condemnation for Julian. Good for her. A man who disrespects the mother of his child isn't a king. He's a coward. Imagine having billions and your only personality is still rich jerk. Team Elena. That baby is better off without that toxic energy. You go, Mama. Elena scrolled through the comments, tears welling in her eyes. But these were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of validation. She wasn't alone. The world saw what she saw. They understood. We did it, she whispered, a sense of awe in her voice. We're not done yet, Chloe said, her expression grimly triumphant. This is just the opening salvo. Now we wait for the king to realize he's been checkmated. As the sun fully illuminated the city, Elena knew that Julian would be waking up soon. He would reach for his phone, expecting to see glowing reports of his party and fawning headlines about his business acumen. Instead, he would find his carefully constructed world burning down around him, ignited by a fire she had started with just 4 of his own words. The war had begun, and for the first time, Eleanor felt like she had a fighting chance. Julian Croft woke up at 6:15 a.m., just as he did every morning. His internal clock was as precise and unforgiving as the algorithms that ran his company. He reached for his phone on the bedside table, a reflex action ready to scan market futures and overnight emails from his Asian offices. But the screen that greeted him was not the familiar black and green of his trading app. It was a chaotic explosion of notifications, hundreds of text messages, dozens of missed calls, alerts from every major news outlet. His brow furrowed in annoyance. Had a server crashed? Had a rival launched a competing product overnight? He swiped open a notification from the New York Times. The headline knocked the air from his lungs. Nexus Dynamics CEO Julian Croft's marriage implodes in public spectacle. His blood ran cold. He frantically swiped to another alert, this one from the Wall Street Journal, his preferred paper, the one his PR team had carefully cultivated for years. +1 comment. Sparks high-stakes divorce, threatening to destabilize Nexus image. His hands started to tremble. This wasn't a business crisis. This was a personal annihilation being broadcast globally. He finally saw the link to the page 6 story that had started it all. He read it, his face paling with every word. Her statement, his quote, just a +1. Seeing his own careless words thrown back at him in black and white, stripped of their joking context, and presented as cold, hard fact, made his stomach clench. He bolted upright in bed, the silk sheets pooling around his waist. "Elena!" he called out, his voice raspy. The silence of the penthouse was his answer. The space that had felt like a kingdom last night now felt like a tomb. He saw her silver dress in a heap on the floor, a shimmering, discarded snakeskin. He remembered her leaving the party. He remembered his own anger at her for causing a scene, for embarrassing him. The stunning lack of self-awareness hit him like a physical blow. He hadn't called. He hadn't checked on her. He had sent one petulant, accusatory text message. And in his silence, she had gone to war. His first instinct was control. He had to fix this kill, the story. He dialed his head of PR, a bulldog named Frank. It was 6:30 a.m., but Frank answered on the first ring, his voice already strained. "Julian, I've been trying to reach you for an hour. It's a Category 5 hurricane." "Kill it, Frank." Julian snarled, pacing the marble floor. "I don't care what it costs. Call the editors. Threaten to pull our ad spend. Release a counter-statement. Say she's unwell, that she's hormonal because of the pregnancy." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Julian, I can't." "What do you mean you can't?" Julian roared. "I pay you 7 figures a year to make problems go away. This isn't a problem you can bury with money," Frank said, his voice flat. "She used your own words. The story is not he said, she said. It's he said, she confirmed. We have no angle. If we attack a pregnant woman who has presented herself with dignity, we will look like absolute monsters. The hashtag Team Elena is already trending worldwide. We have no move here. We've been outmaneuvered." Julian slammed his fist on a glass table, the sound cracking through the silent apartment. Outmaneuvered. He was the master strategist, the man who saw 10 moves ahead. He had been blindsided by his own wife. The woman he thought was a beautiful, compliant accessory had just executed a corporate-level media takedown. His phone buzzed. It was his sister, Amelia. He answered, ready to bark at her, but she spoke first, her voice cold with fury. I just saw the news, Julian, and I have to say I am disgusted. Amelia now is not the time. It is precisely the time she shot back. I sat next to you last night. I saw you do it. I saw her face. I saw her die a little inside. And you didn't even notice. You were too busy preening for your sycophants. What is wrong with you? Did you really think she would just swallow that she would just sit there and be your pretty silent +1 forever? It was a joke, for God's sake. No, it wasn't. Amelia said, her voice cutting. A joke is funny. That was a revelation. It was the truth of how you see her, and she was smart enough to finally believe you. You didn't lose a +1, you idiot. You lost your wife, and from the looks of it, you're about to lose a hell of a lot more. She hung up. The finality in her voice shook him more than the headlines. Amelia had always been his defender, his grounding force. Now she stood with Elena. The reality of his isolation began to set in. He tried to call Elena, but the call wouldn't go through. He realized with a jolt that she had blocked his number. He was completely cut off. The day devolved into a nightmare. His board of directors called an emergency meeting. The stock for Nexus Dynamics, which was built so heavily on his personal brand of visionary stability, had taken a 12% hit in pre-market trading, wiping out billions in valuation. The optics were catastrophic. How could he lead a global technology company into the future if his own family life was a dumpster fire of his own making? Marcus Thorne gleefully fanned the flames, giving a quote to Bloomberg. A company's culture starts at the top. We prioritize partnership and respect here. It's a shame others don't. It was a dagger, and it hit its mark. Julian spent the day huddled with his legal team. They were grim-faced and practical. Elena was being represented by Chloe Bennett. They called her the executioner. She's going for the jugular, Julian, his lead lawyer, a man named Henderson, advised. Her opening move was a media blitz. Her next move will be financial. Given the public humiliation and the emotional distress claim, she's not just going to get half. She's going to get half plus a premium for pain and suffering. And the judge will give it to her. Julian slumped in his leather office chair, the city glittering mockingly outside his window. He had spent his entire life building an impenetrable fortress of wealth and power. He had believed he was invincible. But in one night of breathtaking arrogance, he had given his wife the key to the gates, and she hadn't just walked out. She had locked him inside and set the whole thing on fire. He kept replaying the moment in his head, the smug look on his own face, the pained, shocked silence from Elena. He had done it. He had said the words. He had been so consumed with projecting an image of power that he had destroyed the one person who had loved him for the man he was behind the facade. He thought of the baby, his child, a child who would now be born into a broken home whose parents would be tabloid fodder. He had wanted a legacy, an heir to his empire. Now his legacy would be a viral hashtag. Late that night, alone in the vast, silent penthouse, Julian Croft finally understood. He had won every battle he had ever fought in the boardroom on Wall Street in the tech world. But he had just lost the only war that had ever truly mattered. The silence was no longer just the absence of noise. It was the sound of his future, a future without her in it. And it was deafening. 3 months passed. The initial firestorm of the divorce announcement eventually subsided as all viral stories do replaced by new scandals and fresher outrage. But the embers continued to glow. The phrase +1 divorce had entered the cultural lexicon a shorthand for a certain kind of high-profile, arrogant downfall. For Julian, the consequences were lasting. The divorce settlement was as brutal as Chloe had promised. Elena, guided by her friend's sharp legal mind, refused to be silenced by an ironclad NDA. Instead, she agreed to a settlement that was purely financial, but immense. She took not just her share of their marital assets, but a significant portion of his personal stock in Nexus Dynamics, enough to make her independently wealthy for 100 lifetimes, and enough to dilute his controlling interest in the company he considered his soul. The board, spooked by his recklessness, had used the opportunity to install a new chairman, leaving Julian with the title of CEO, but stripping him of ultimate authority. He was, for the first time in his adult life, accountable to someone other than himself. His kingdom had shrunk. The fawning associates kept their distance. The party invitations dwindled. His social circle, built on the unstable ground of power and proximity, had crumbled. He was still a billionaire, but he was a diminished one, a cautionary tale whispered about at the same galas where he once held court. He rattled around the silent penthouse, a ghost in a life he had built and then torched. Elena, on the other hand, had disappeared. She hadn't given a single follow-up interview. She hadn't posed for any magazine covers or signed a book deal. After her one powerful statement, she had simply vanished from the public eye, denying the voracious media the dramatic second act they craved. She had moved out of Chloe's corporate apartment and left New York entirely. She had bought a sprawling, sun-drenched property in Santa Barbara, California. It was an older house, a Spanish-style hacienda with thick, whitewashed walls, a terracotta roof, and a courtyard overflowing with bougainvillea. It was private, nestled in the hills with a view of the Pacific Ocean. It was a home, not a showroom. Her life was quiet and deliberate. She spent her mornings doing prenatal yoga in the garden, her afternoons reading and preparing for the baby's arrival. The third bedroom had been converted into a studio, and for the first time in years, she began to think about art again. Not as an asset or a social currency, but as a passion. She reconnected with old friends from the art world, people who had known her as Eleanor Vance, not Mrs. Croft. They talked about paintings and artists, not stock prices and social events. Her life began to feel like her own again. She was now 9 months pregnant, her belly a round, perfect sphere. She felt a profound sense of peace, a quiet joy that was hers and hers alone. She was creating a life both literally and figuratively on her own terms. One warm afternoon, she was sitting in her courtyard, a book resting on her lap when Amelia called. They spoke regularly now, a strange but genuine friendship forged in the fallout of Julian's actions. "How are you feeling?" Amelia asked, her voice warm. "Ready to pop?" "Just about," Elena laughed. "I'm the size of a small whale, but a very happy one." "I'm glad to hear it," Amelia said. There was a slight hesitation in her voice. "Listen, Elena. Julian asked me for your address." Elena's hand instinctively went to her stomach. A flicker of the old tension returned. "What did you tell him?" "I told him to go to hell." "Of course," Amelia said fiercely. "And then I told him that if he ever wanted to have even a remote chance of being in his child's life, he would respect your boundaries and wait for you to contact him if you ever choose to. He needs to understand that he has no right to your space anymore." A wave of gratitude washed over Eleanor. "Thank you, Amelia. He's different," Amelia continued, her voice softer, quieter. "The arrogance has been knocked out of him. I think for the first time he's actually alone with his own thoughts and he doesn't like the company. He lost Elena in every way that matters. I just wanted you to know that. After they hung up, Elena sat with the information. She felt no triumph, no vengeful glee, just a sad, quiet pity for the man she had once loved. He had needed to lose everything to understand what was important, and she hoped for his sake that the lesson would stick. A week later, her son was born. She named him Leo. He was small and perfect, with a tuft of dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold a calm wisdom. As she held him in her arms in the quiet of the hospital room, the ocean visible from her window, she felt a love so immense and pure it eclipsed everything else. This was her world now. This was her legacy. She was no longer Julian Croft's wife, or his accessory, or his +1. She was Elena Vance. She was a mother. She was a survivor. And she was finally completely free. That single shattering moment at the dinner table wasn't just an ending. It was a violent, necessary beginning. Elena's story is a powerful reminder that self-worth is not something that can be given or taken away by another person, no matter how rich or powerful they are. It's something you claim for yourself. She walked away from a kingdom of glass and steel to build a life of quiet strength and authentic joy for herself and her child. Her story became a viral sensation, not just because of the drama, but because it struck a chord with anyone who has ever felt small, dismissed, or undervalued. It shows that the most powerful statement you can ever make is choosing to honor your own truth, even when it means walking away from everything you thought you wanted. What did you think of Elena's incredible story of reclaiming her power? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by her journey, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of resilience and transformation.